In 1962, on a Thanksgiving morning in Harlem, a line of women, children, and old men stretched 4 blocks down 135th Street. They were not waiting for a soup kitchen. They were not waiting for a church. They were waiting for a man named Bumpy Johnson to hand them a turkey. Here's what nobody tells you. Bumpy Johnson fed Harlem for 40 years. He paid rent for widows. He bought groceries for families whose fathers were in prison. He picked up the check for strangers at Wells Restaurant who did not know who he was. Number 14 is the dish he made sure every Harlem child had on Christmas morning. Number 8 was the meal he delivered to a single mother on 132nd Street every Friday for 9 straight years. And number 1 was the gift that turned a numbers runner from Charleston, South Carolina, into the most loved man in the most famous black neighborhood in America. Hit subscribe. This is Bloody Food. Let us count down the 20 soul foods Bumpy Johnson fed Harlem for free. The poor man meals that made him untouchable. Number 20, smothered chicken. Bone-in chicken, browned hard, then nestled into a thick onion gravy, and slow cooked for 40 minutes until the meat falls off the bone. When Bumpy walked out of Alcatraz in 1963, the first thing he did, before he even unpacked, was pay an entire month of overdue rent for a family on 134th Street, whose father had died while he was gone. He sent a pan of smothered chicken from Sylvia's over that same night. 11 years on the rock had not taken his memory for who was hungry. Number 19, collard greens with pot liquor. Greens washed 3 times, simmered 2 hours with a smoked ham hock until the pot fills with dark broth. Every Sunday, Mamie Johnson made a pot big enough for the whole apartment building. Extra portions went into mason jars and got delivered by Bumpy's driver to 3 specific families on 132nd Street. Same families, every Sunday, for years. A grandmother on the 2nd floor told a neighbor those jars were the only reason her grandchildren had vegetables that winter. Bumpy never wanted credit. The greens spoke for themselves. Number 18, cornbread, the whole pan. Cornmeal, buttermilk, egg, bacon grease. Poured into a screaming hot cast iron skillet and baked until the bottom cracks like a crust. No sugar. Mamie baked 2 pans at a time. One stayed at Lenox Terrace. The other went to the apartment of a woman on 135th Street, whose husband was doing federal time at Lewisburg. The woman never met Bumpy. She did not have to. Bumpy paid the rent on her apartment for the entire 6 years her husband was inside. The cornbread was just a side note. A man who pays your rent for 6 years does not need to ring the doorbell. Number 17, black-eyed peas and rice. Dried peas soaked overnight, simmered with a ham hock until creamy. Rice was added in the last 20 minutes. This was the dish Bumpy sent out at New Year's. His crew drove a delivery truck through Harlem on December 31st, dropping paper sacks at addresses Bumpy kept in his head. Peas, ham hock, rice, greens. Enough for Hoppin' John on January 1st. Enough for luck. The delivery stopped in 1968. The year he died, no truck came around. A lot of Harlem families said that was the year the luck ran out. Number 16, sweet potato pie. Roasted sweet potatoes, brown sugar, evaporated milk, eggs, cinnamon, and nutmeg. The mixture was poured into a butter crust and baked until the top set. Bumpy bought sweet potato pies by the dozen at a Lenox Avenue bakery. Most did not stay home. They went to funeral repasts of men who had died with no insurance, to the wakes of women who had been Harlem's beloved neighbors, to families who could not afford to feed the people who came to mourn. Number 15, fried chicken at Wells. A neighborhood that loses a man without a feast does not heal right. Bumpy made sure Harlem healed right. Buttermilk-soaked chicken, dredged in seasoned flour, fried in deep cast iron skillets until the crust shatters. Bumpy ate at Wells almost every night for 30 years. But here's what most people do not know. Bumpy picked up the check for half the room. Mamie wrote that her husband would arrive, look around at who was eating that night, and quietly tell the waitress to put the bill of any single mother, any elderly couple, or any working person who looked tired onto his tab. Those people often never knew. They would ask for the check. The waitress would say it was taken care of. A man who needs to be thanked is not really given. Number 14, Christmas ham. Here is the dish from the hook. A whole bone-in ham, scored, rubbed with brown sugar and mustard, studded with cloves, roasted slow for 4 hours until the glaze caramelizes into a dark amber crust. Every Christmas Eve from the 1930s until his death in 1968, with 11 prison years subtracted, Bumpy's crew handed out hams on the corners of 135th, 132nd, and 125th. Each ham came with sweet potatoes, brown sugar, cloves, greens, and a pie. Hundreds of hams. Every December, no list, no qualification. If you walked up, the ham landed in your arms. Bumpy remembered being a child at Christmas in Charleston, in a house where his parents could not afford a ham. He never wanted a single Harlem child to remember Christmas the same way. Number 13, macaroni and cheese, pan-baked. Elbow macaroni layered with sharp cheddar, evaporated milk, an egg, salt, pepper, paprika, baked at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for 40 minutes until the top browns. Bumpy's sister Mabel made this every Sunday at her apartment on 134th Street in a casserole dish big enough for 12. There were rarely 12 people at her table, but there were always people in her hallway, in her stairwell, who would smell that mac and cheese cooking and find a reason to knock. Mabel never turned a hungry person away. Bumpy paid the rent on Mabel's apartment from the day he came home from Alcatraz until the day he died. He paid it so Mabel could keep her door open. Some doors in Harlem stayed open because of Bumpy Johnson. Number 12, oxtail, stew. Beef oxtail browned hard, then stewed 4 hours with tomato, onion, and red wine until the meat slides off the bone. Served over white rice. On cold winter days, Bumpy had his driver pick up 4 or 5 plates of oxtail stew from Frazier's and deliver them to specific addresses he never wrote down. Old men mostly, men who had once run with him in the 1940s and were now too sick or too poor to come around. Men he had not forgotten. A boss who forgets his old soldiers is not really a boss. Bumpy never forgot anyone who had stood next to him when it counted. Number 11, fried catfish. Catfish soaked in milk, dredged in seasoned cornmeal, fried hard until the crust shatters, white bread on the side, hot sauce on top. A church on 138th Street held a Friday fish fry every week to raise money for its building fund. The church almost lost the building in 1965 when the fund came up short. Bumpy Johnson wrote a check that covered the entire shortfall. The church never knew who had saved it. The pastor preached at his funeral 3 years later and said one line nobody outside the family understood. This building still stands because of him. The congregation thought he was speaking in metaphor. He was not. Number 10, salmon croquettes. A can of pink salmon mixed with onion, egg, and breadcrumbs, shaped into patties, fried in hot grease until dark golden. Mamie made these on Saturday mornings, but she also made them on Tuesday afternoons and on Thursday afternoons, and those croquettes did not get eaten at Lenox Terrace. They went, wrapped in foil, in a paper bag, to the home of a Korean war widow on 131st Street, whose husband had been killed in 1953. She had 3 children. She worked at a laundry. She made $11 a week. Every Tuesday and Thursday for 14 years, salmon croquettes arrived at her door. She never met Bumpy. She buried him in 1968 from a folding chair in the back row at his funeral. She told her children, years later, that he was the reason they had eaten. Here's what nobody tells you about Bumpy Johnson. He did not feed Harlem because he wanted to be loved. He fed Harlem because he could not stand the alternative. This was a man who had grown up in Charleston, South Carolina, in a family so poor that his older brother almost got lynched in 1919, and his parents put him on a train north at 13 years old to save his life. He never forgot what hunger felt like. When the money came, when the numbers banks turned him into a wealthy man, he did not buy a yacht. He did not buy a country house in Connecticut. He bought hams. He paid rents. He delivered croquettes. The Italian bosses downtown got rich and stayed rich. Bumpy Johnson got rich and gave it away. That is the reason Harlem still says his name with respect 60 years after he died. He did not buy their loyalty. He earned it, one ham at a time. Number 9, pork chops smothered. Thin bone in pork chops, browned hard, smothered in a slow onion gravy until tender. When the numbers operations brought in a big payday, Bumpy's crew would buy out an entire butcher's pork supply and deliver chops, wrapped in butcher paper, to addresses Bumpy kept on a list nobody else ever saw. The list had over 100 names on it by 1965. A boss who hands out pork chops is not really a boss anymore. He is something Harlem had not seen before and has not seen since. Number 8, hot sausage sandwich. Here's the dish from the hook. Italian pork sausage, grilled until the skin blisters, piled onto a long roll with peppers and onions cooked down in the same pan. Wrapped in wax paper. There was a single mother on 132nd Street who worked nights cleaning offices in Midtown. She had 4 children. She came home at 4 in the morning every weekday. Every Friday morning, there was a paper bag on her doorstep with 5 hot sausage sandwiches, still warm. She had no idea who left them. For 9 straight years, the sandwiches came on Fridays. In 1968, the Friday after Bumpy Johnson died, no sandwiches came. The woman walked up to Wells' restaurant that Sunday and asked the waitress if anyone there knew anything about it. Junie Bird, sitting at Bumpy's old booth, told her the truth. She put her head down on the counter at Wells and cried for 40 minutes. That is the kind of grief you cannot name, the kind only a fed person feels for the hand that fed them. Number 7, peach cobbler. Fresh peaches with sugar, cinnamon, and lemon under a biscuit dough lattice, baked until bubbling. Served warm with vanilla ice cream. Sylvia Woods made it every day on Lenox Avenue. Bumpy ordered 5 extra cobblers every Sunday afternoon and had them packed up to go. They went to a children's home on 142nd Street. Bumpy did this for the 5 years between his release from Alcatraz and his death. That is over 1,200 cobblers. Children who grew up in that home, men and women now in their 60s, still remember those Sundays. They do not remember Bumpy Johnson's name. They remember the cobbler. That is the right way to be remembered. Number 6, chitterlings cleaned. Hog intestines cleaned for hours, scrubbed and soaked in vinegar. Every membrane stripped by hand. Boiled with onion, garlic, vinegar, and hot pepper. A church on 145th Street held an annual chitterling dinner to raise funds. In 1966, the church almost had to cancel because the cost was going to eat their entire profit. Bumpy Johnson paid for the chitterlings out of his own pocket. He also paid the women who cleaned them $4 an hour, double the going rate. He sat at the back of the dinner that year and ate his plate like everyone else. The pastor never publicly thanked him. That was the deal. A man who needs his name on the program is a man who has missed the point of giving. Number 5, Hoppin' John. Dried black-eyed peas simmered with a smoked ham hock, onion, and garlic. Rice added in the last 20 minutes to absorb the broth. Eaten on January 1st. Greens on the side, cornbread to follow. The peas are coins, the greens are dollars. The cornbread is gold. Bumpy spent 11 New Year's days in Alcatraz. When he came home in 1963, his first January 1st as a free man, Mamie had a pot of Hoppin' John on the stove. He sat down. He looked at the bowl for a full minute. He picked up the spoon. Then he asked Mamie how many of their neighbors did not have Hoppin' John that morning. She said she did not know. He sent his driver out with 20 pots from Sylvia's that afternoon to be delivered to 20 addresses. No questions asked. A man who has spent 11 New Year's days alone in a cell does not let other people spend their New Year's Day hungry. Number 4, pot roast. A chuck roast seared on every side, then braised 3 hours with onions, carrots, celery, and beef broth until the meat falls apart with a fork. Mamie made it every Sunday at Lenox Terrace, but here's the part most people miss. Mamie always made too much. The pot was bigger than 4 people needed. There were always leftovers. Those leftovers did not go in the fridge. They went out the door, repackaged into smaller containers, delivered by Bumpy's driver to specific apartments in the building where elderly tenants lived alone. Every Monday morning, for 5 years, the tenants thought the building had a leftovers program. There was no program. There was Mamie cooking double on purpose and Bumpy making sure nobody on his floor went hungry. Number 3, sweet tea by the pitcher. Strong black tea poured hot over a pound of sugar, stirred until dissolved, cut with cold water, poured over ice. A glass cost a nickel at Wells in 1965. But here's the thing about sweet tea in Harlem. It came free if you knew Bumpy. He had a standing arrangement with the waitresses at Wells, Sylvia's, and Frazier's. Anyone who looked thirsty and could not afford a drink got a glass on his tab. The bill came to him at the end of the month. He paid it without looking. Mamie estimated her husband bought roughly 5,000 glasses of sweet tea for strangers between 1963 and 1968. 5,000 people walked out of a Harlem restaurant cooler than they walked in because of a man they had never met. That is also a kind of feeding, the kind people forget to count. Number 2, soul food, whole plates. A plate of fried chicken, mac and cheese, collard greens, candied yams, cornbread, and a slice of pie. The full Harlem Sunday dinner on a single foil container. Every weekend, the kitchens at Wells, Sylvia's, and Sherman's packed up dozens of these plates and sent them out into Harlem on Bumpy Johnson's tab. To families he had heard about, to addresses Mamie had whispered to him, to corners where he had seen someone looking too thin. Mamie later estimated her husband paid for over 15,000 whole plates of soul food in his lifetime. 15,000 families who ate a hot Sunday meal because a man who did not know their names had decided that nobody in Harlem should eat alone on a Sunday. The Italian bosses downtown built empires. Bumpy Johnson built dinners. There is a difference. Number 1, the Thanksgiving turkey. This is the gift from the hook. A whole turkey brined overnight in salt water with bay leaves and peppercorns. Roasted in a hot oven for 3 hours. Basted every 30 minutes with pan drippings. This is what made Bumpy Johnson untouchable. Every Thanksgiving from the early 1930s until his death in 1968, with 11 prison years subtracted, his crew handed out turkeys on the corners of 135th Street, 132nd Street, 125th Street, and any corner where families needed one. 500 turkeys a year, by Mamie's count, sometimes more. Each turkey came in a paper bag with cornmeal, sugar, greens, and yams. No qualification, no list, no church membership. If you walked up, the turkey landed in your arms. And here's why he was untouchable. Federal agents tailed him for years. Police informants tried to flip the people around him. 3 administrations made him a target. And not one person in Harlem ever gave him up. Not because they were afraid of him. Because their grandmother had eaten his turkey. Because their cousin had eaten his pork chops. Because their mother had received his salmon croquettes for 14 years and never even known his name. You cannot snitch on the man who fed your family. It is not allowed. Not in Harlem. Not in any neighborhood with a memory. Bumpy Johnson made himself untouchable not with violence, with food. The Italian bosses had soldiers. Bumpy had eaters. He fed Harlem for 40 years, and Harlem fed him protection in return. That is the deal he made, and the deal he kept, until his heart finally gave out on a chicken leg at Wells' restaurant in July of 1968. He died with grits on the plate, and 500 turkeys were already being ordered for the following November. Make it. Sit down at a table to eat it. Invite somebody who lives alone. Make too much on purpose. That is the law Bumpy Johnson lived by. Cook for one person more than you need to. Leave a comment telling me which dish you're gonna make. And tell me about somebody who fed your family when you had nothing. Every neighborhood has had a Bumpy Johnson. Most of them, like him, never wanted credit. The least we can do is name them out loud, just once, before the people who remember them are gone.